Praise be to Jesus Christ and to Mary. Have a good and holy day to all of you, dear children, in the sacred hearts of Jesus and Mary, and in the chaste heart of Saint Joseph. Welcome back to our morning segment, Holy in Coffee, with the ever-present Madonna of Pompeii. Someone asked me, Father, how do you manage to carry such a large image around? Let's do it, we can manage because it's a huge poster that we then position when it comes to doing the live broadcasts. So today is Monday, the 21st of October. In the traditional liturgical calendar, there is no memorial. However, today, particularly the 21st of October, we celebrate the feast of Saint Santa and the Martyr Companions. And the 21st of October is also the liturgical memorial of Blessed Martyr Father Pio Puglisi. This date was chosen. I remember how Cardinal 𝐥'Giorgi worked at the Holy See, the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, for the beatification. Blessed. His body is buried in the Cathedral of Palermo. He was killed by the Mafia on the 15th of September in '93. I had him as a spiritual father in the seminary for a year. I didn't get on very well with him because he had some rather progressive ideas. But the Lord, it seems, thanks be to God, can also overcome when he wants. He finds a way, this sort of thing, because for a priest who was indeed progressive, like Father Pio Puglisi, the Lord granted nothing less than the gift of martyrdom. I don't know if the direction will show, for those who might not know, some photos of the Blessed Father Pio Puglisi, a priest from Palermo who was killed by the Mafia, has also been able to be recognized by the objective criteria for his testimony in blood. In hatred of the faith, but we might talk about this on another occasion. Today is Monday, a new week begins, slowly leading us towards the end of this month of October, dedicated to Our Lady of the Rosary of Pompeii. I remind you that we are on an apostolic tour. Yesterday we were in Bologna, and the day before in Florence. As I mentioned last night in the segment The Father Responds, there were two wonderful meetings. The people always respond. This is the meeting in Florence. This is the hall with the main wing, but the side wing also had several faithful present, with an extraordinary contribution from Father Ramon, and then the Mass by Brother Celestino, with many communions. This is still Florence. And then yesterday, on the other hand, it was in the morning. So some couldn't come. I said to myself, we'd be few, but instead the room that was initially half full, as you can see, filled up. It filled up. And so Florence and Bologna, as always, we take the little vote. We do not see, we thank God we do not exist. Now, with what has happened in the past few days, there is still a commotion. This morning, on the New Daily Compass, there is a second article by Luisella Scrosati on Father Fare, a second article mentioned by name. This is interesting. Don Minutella, as Don Ramon said, does not exist around the new compass, even when, let's say, they should tell the truth. They don't. But they act this way. They say the truth, but they are against the gospel. Why do they censor? They are free to do so. It doesn't seem evangelical. As you know, I mention everyone, and I have no issue with anyone. It's not that I choose not to talk about someone. It's not that I might scare them or anything. It's not that in the end, for example, Don Ramon's speech on Saturday in Florence didn't deserve more attention. I cannot remain silent because it's a blog. It's gaining traction at the moment. It's being targeted. The Bishop of Livorno now has to intervene, and so on and so forth. It's interesting, this media boycott that's ongoing, which perhaps shows that we are indeed in the full truth, because everyone is coming at us. Anyway, the people's response is there, and they are gritting their teeth. gritting their teeth and in their editorial offices. What is their actual following? Even Bergoglio lacks a real following. It seems like he has a following, but since he's in charge, he has his court. But more and more we see people around, but what do I care about Bergoglio? But who is Bergoglio? Youth ask. Few days are asked, I'm not making it up, and there's Fra Ernestino who could. Bergoglio's the first without followers. You will see that as soon as the Eternal Father says enough, up to here and no further, just like in the book of Job, when it speaks of God the Creator telling the waves of the sea, up to here. This has always struck me because it really is so. It can only be a physical or chemical law, but willed by God, that this sea, billions of cubic meters of water, can occasionally overflow with a tsunami. But these are exceptional things because, after all, the wave of the sea, even if it is very high, at a certain point stops. Those who stroll along the beach, like I do, observe this with a certain fascination. I mean the sea, and sometimes even now. Incredibly, I spend my winters up north mostly, but when I'm down in Sicily, in the morning I go for that walk there. At the beach of Maggiari in 𝐵'Cinici. I mention the name because this beach is quite well known now, even for many from the Little Rest. And when the sea is stormy, the sea is rough. I enjoy watching this sea that seems to want to swallow 𝐵'Cinici, Terracini, Carini, but it must stop, as God decrees, not a second more, not a second less. Because that time is God's, but how can we enter the mind of God? No one has ever been able to enter the mind of God. The letter of St. Paul to the Romans, which is a puzzle. That letter there, however, begins at a certain point with this very beautiful thing. Who has ever been the Lord's advisor? No one can say to the Lord, do this or do that. No one. So Bergoglio has no following. He doesn't have one either, because... Why? And there's the court that follows him, and a couple of enthusiasts. And then let's not talk about these members of the pseudo-Catholic mainstream, from New Daily Compass to all these others. They have no following. The anger they feel is in seeing that the following exists, and they have tried in every way to detach Don Dominatella from this people, but they can't, because the bond between Don Dominatella and the Sodalizio with this small remnant is supernatural. This morning I was reading a phrase that the devil said to Father Bamonte, who is an exorcist. I'm amazed that he still remains with the false church. It's an inexplicable mystery, but that's his problem. Father Bamonte said that Satan said that the Immaculate Heart of Mary will triumph, and it's in quotation marks, the phrase I'm now saying, with those few. It doesn't say with few, but with those, almost wanting to identify them with those few. In another exorcism, he said that he will triumph with the little remnant. He really said it, with a small remnant. It's clearly us. We must be patient, because what do you want? The devil does everything to hinder this mission. I don't think I'm exaggerating. It can't be that I'm mistaken. I can't find a more objectively obstructed mission than ours. The whole world against us is similar to that of St. Athanasius in the 4th century, because there too the devil launched an attack on Christianity to make it disappear from the face of the earth. Everyone fell silent, even the Pope of Rome, first Liberius, and not Liberius, what's his name, Sylvester, and then others followed, Julius, who was also a holy man. As a saintly man, we propose Camastri, but who knows how long they rot in purgatory, as silence strengthens entities. However, he is the only one who stood up and shouted that Jesus Christ was truly God, as St. Athanasius, the Lion of Alexandria, had indeed stopped the Council of Nicaea. I wrote a novel about that, and I must say that in recent days, I can't remember where it happened, I believe in Lugano, a believer said to me, and this is always a source of gratification for me, because when you appreciate those novels, it pleases me more than these other popular books. Novels are my strong suit, and one person said, Father, I read that novel in one go. It's truly beautiful. This is a valid reason for me. It's a novel that I wrote about the life of Saint Athanasius, who stood against the whole world to save Christianity. And he won, and he won, and he was truly alone. Well, this situation we're experiencing is one where everything is at stake, as we'll soon discuss. So this evening, I remind you that at 9 o'clock, there is the presentation of the statute of the Marian Priestly Association by Don Enrico at 9 o'clock on the YouTube channel of Radio Domina Nostra. I invite you to like and also to subscribe if you haven't done so. Share, share, share. We also met last summer down in Sicily, and we really threw it. Don Enrico did it. And then we shared our thoughts, and he had time to organize it, refine it, correct it, and so on. And now it's ready, and we are making it known. This evening at 9 o'clock on the YouTube channel, don't miss the episode with Father Enrico presenting the statute of the Marian Priestly Association. So everyone knows what the rules are that define our journey. Then tomorrow evening is the War Tuesday. Make sure you don't miss the very topical episode, Lupus in Fabula, the episode tomorrow evening from my book The False Church and Its Destiny, which is always available in the new edition, is titled The Great Test, Catechism of the Catholic Church 6.0, number 675. It is the final seduction. Here the great test is the final seduction. Wednesday, Brother Celestino. Thursday, Revelation. Saturday, Faith's Little Heroes. Tonight and tomorrow are key. Others are developing. In the meantime, our apostolic tour continues. Our apostolic tour now includes 2 stops next weekend. On Saturday, the 26th of October at 4:30 in the afternoon, we will be in Cervigliano del Friuli. I believe we have been there before, if I remember correctly. Cervigliano del Friuli International Hotel via Monsignor Angelo Ramazzotti. There's even a Monsignor. Everything is in place. At 4:30 in the afternoon, this is currently an invitation extended to all the faithful of the small Friulian remnant, but also to everyone else from nearby areas who wish to come and participate in this moment. And on Sunday, the 27th of October, next Sunday, we will be in Graz, Austria, for a meeting with Father Johannes and the tiny, tiny remnant of German speakers who have survived the recent storms that you are all well aware of. Then I remind you of the appointments that are already 2 key events now. 2nd November, commemoration of the faithful departed in Verona at 4:30. Call Radio Domina Nostra to give names of your deceased and donate as you can. Bring their photos on 2nd November to place by the altar. Graceful moment. And then on the 10th of November in Cassino, hurry up to sign up if you want to come by coach, because there are already more than 80 registered. So we need to see if we need to take another coach, and please do it in good time. It's free, both to and from, on the 10th of November in Cassino for the little rest of Lazio. The other stops will be communicated to you, but I cannot overlook that on the 1st of November, as I mentioned last night, it is the Feast of All Saints. We will be in Trento. This 1st of November is not just a side note. For pastoral reasons, I am particularly emphasizing the 2nd of November, because we are stepping up. In contrast to the many talkers of the first, second, third, and last hour, we are stepping up. We have stepped up to help people break free from this false church of darkness led by the false Pope Bergoglio. On the 1st of November, we are, because it is the Solemnity of All Saints in Trento, and not at all a mere stop, by the way. In some ways, it's more crucial than 2nd November. I repeat, stressing 2nd November to offer condolences to dead dogs. All Saints' Day is on 1st November. Trento's people feel honored. We're there for All Saints' Day on November 1st at 4:30. Trento. These are the appointments. And then on the 3rd of November, the day after All Souls' Day, on a Sunday, we will be in Bergamo. These are the upcoming appointments. Remember to help us. because there is always a great need for your support, and the work continues. In Little Nazareth, everything is still a bit quiet. I know there are already more than 300 registered for my Silver Jubilee celebration, the priestly one on the 27th of December, and I am grateful for that. However, those who need more time to organize themselves are welcome to come. Right, finally, let's get to today's episode. That is titled, in quotation marks, because it's a quote, it is titled today's episode, Soon a False Church. That's how today's episode is titled. Soon a false church, in quotation marks. And then as you can see in parentheses, Padre Pio, because that strong statement, that phrase wasn't said by just anyone. It was said by a man of God who never strayed from anything. Riminghi. Father Pio is an exception, I believe. I'll say why, I think. There are men who have a great mission. They must suffer. They are always in the porch, visibly or in a, let's say, hidden way. Why? Because suffering, raised to a certain degree, especially when hidden behind a smile, the joy which is not false, is truly a gift of the Holy Spirit that keeps you safe from pride, from arrogance, and so on. I mean, if you look, the great saints were never well. No, Gregory the Great suffered with his stomach all his life. He got gout, he was going down to preach with the stretcher. We saw Giovanni Paolo II, although perhaps in the final phase of his life, but we cannot know the inner struggles, because God measures it that way. It's interesting, this thing. It's very interesting. We could talk about countless other saints who had extraordinary missions, which is truly a mission in a body, in a physical form. As St. Paul would say, a vessel of faith. But even St. Paul himself, right? Virtue and weakness, that is. My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect, says Jesus. The Lord to Paul is revealed in your weakness. Now, this physical weakness is a very significant concept for me. Put it away. No one can claim, whether in a gown or a tie, that they can enter the eschatological lagoon, because that's what this is about. But we're just joking, dear children. I take my responsibilities, because I always pay for it with leniency. As much as I seem like a loudmouth, those close to me know that I could never ever be someone like Pius X. Don Enrico Berlusconi, for example, could be that way in this, and he is. I need to ask him and the brothers a bit, because sometimes, in light of what has happened and what was foreseen, I was buying time because I always said, and they are witnesses to this, let's wait, let's see, as long as we can walk together. But no one should expect, whether in a tie, a jacket, a cassock, or with the red hat of a cardinal, to enter this apocalyptic arena of the final clash unless they carry the cross, unless they bleed. Don Bosco was unwell his whole life. He hid these things, but when he couldn't, he couldn't. Once he got a pimple in his private parts, he experienced immense pain that he obviously couldn't hide. They were those things that sometimes cannot be hidden. Don Bosco had that vision, a dream, a vision of the Madonna inviting him to enter a beautiful garden with a very bright gate. Take off your shoes, the Madonna tells him. He takes off his shoes. Walking barefoot along the path, it wounds him completely, so his feet are all bleeding. He reaches the end of the path and can barely stand. The Madonna tells him that these thorns will become roses. Mind the chatter, the gossip magazine, the tablet. Now more than ever, because the devil is cunning. The church is not saved by chatter. The church is saved through suffering, sacrifice, and martyrdom. Father Pio has almost, in my opinion, a kind of infallibility. I know it's not theologically possible to prove it, but if you notice, many saints, even great saints, have been mistaken about certain things, even dramatically, regarding certain situations or people themselves. Padre Pio rarely happened. Why? But because he was soaked in pain first. Saturated with pain, because pain provides security, pain sanctifies, pain purifies, pain frees from the self. Besides being a man who suffered, Padre Pio, I have recounted a truly incredible episode about an Austrian priest a few times. I include it in my book, always available. My books are always available. I write, preach, announce. Then I do not exist, except for the little remainder. But I said Peroni. I was saying that in this book, Padre Pio, I recount this true episode. Padre Pio was now in his 60s, at a time when there were no persecutions. Because just imagine how the devil hindered him with all those persecutions. Father Pio could have done so much more. Not allowed. And if we must, these others who have read my book, they told me, Father, how you have valued 𝐸manuele Brunato. Your book is in pole position because hardly anyone else has done it. If Father Pio was able to achieve it, it's because that poor layman 𝐸manuele Brunato sacrificed himself. I haven't found an 𝐸manuele Brunato because I am not Father Pio, a layman who is Saint Father. May he stand by me with absolute fidelity, recognizing that I am the layman with these qualities, but you are the guide. And the devil has always played on this, trying to overshadow me. It's incredible what has happened in the past few days with the lion. It's a point-by-point bypass of myself. I think I will never find. My mission continues mainly with the little remainder, simple and humble people who believe in this thing. 𝐸manuele Brunato saved Padre Pio, because otherwise who knows what would have happened to him. They wanted to transfer him. They wanted to take him to a convent in the Veneto region, but hidden away, I believe, among the Dolomites, the cardinals were against it. It was something out of this world. And he was about to publish a pamphlet detailing all the misdeeds committed by the Vatican cardinals. They were worried. They left Padre Pio alone, only to later discover that Brunato died under mysterious circumstances. The evening before he died, he called a friend, and it's all written in my book, Padre Pio, Man of God. The evening before he died, Brunato called his friend and asked him to come to his house immediately. His friend was called Peroni, Luigi Peroni. He asks him, and he tells it in his book, Luigi Peroni tells it, "But why, Emanuele, are you in such a hurry?" "But I don't know if you're coming, I'll tell you, but look, I really can't come tonight." Well, he feels bad about it, 𝐸manuele Brunato, and he says, "Well, listen, look, I've put some highly confidential documents about Padre Pio from previous years here and there. In short, tomorrow morning, they found him dead. 𝐸manuele Brunato, Padre Pio. Padre Pio was almost infallible. He hardly made any mistakes. Why'd he have it? I reiterate, why suffer? I was telling the story of the priest who one day, an Austrian, goes to San Giovanni Rotondo and sees this friar, a new Elijah, if you will, as I describe him in my book, a little Moses, Padre Pio, our beloved Pio. And as he walks slowly and blesses the people who, why was Padre Pio grumpy? Do you know why Padre Pio was grumpy? He was, but know why grumpy? Because people would bring scissors, and as he passed by, they would cut his robe. Now the Eternal Father tells us, because if the garment is then taken home to the child who is dying, because it is all witnessed, they put the cloth of Father Pio on him, the child heals. What can the poor Father Pio do? He must accept that he is left naked. If he gets nothing, he gets nothing, but if he gets a miracle, people talk. As he walks by, a priest sees him from behind. No, not from behind, he's there. Father Pio passes, and while he's passing, this priest, in my book there's a name, thinks like this: Father Pio, I'm communicating with you. I want to
Fabio,
experience what
io
you
voglio
suffer.
sperimentare quello che tu soffri. Nessuno
I
crede
don't
di
think
avere tutto
anyone
questo
has ever had the
coraggio
courage
di
to
dir
say
così.
that.
Chissà questo
Who knows
signore
what made
perché
this
cosa l'ha
priest do that?
fatto. Ebbene, miei cari,
Well, my
Padre
dear
Pio,
ones,
cioè questo
Father
sacerdote,
Pio,
mi
that is, this
racconta che in
priest,
un istante
recounts that in an
si è
instant he
sentito
felt as if his
come
body were
il
being
corpo
crushed. He
stritolato
felt as if he were
e si è
immersed in a
sentito come
cauldron of
immerso in
boiling
una
oil.
caldaia di
He
olio
felt as if he
bollente,
could no
si è
longer
sentito
breathe,
come se non
a
avesse più
suffering, a pain,
nessun respiro, una sofferenza, un dolore, una
a sacrifice I
immolazione
could
che
never have
potrebbe venire.
imagined.
Dice lui
He
che è
says it
durato
lasted a
paio di
couple of
istanti.
moments.
E allora
And
sempre
so,
con la
still in
mente
his mind, he
frammentata,
shouted to
Padre
Padre
Pio,
Pio,
basta,
"Enough,
Padre
Padre
Pio,
Pio, enough!"
basta! Padre Pio si è
Padre Pio
voltato
turned and
e l'ha
looked at him,
guardato
then
e ha
continued.
proseguito. E poi nei
And then in the
dialoghi agli
dialogues with
amici
𝐸'Z𝐼
locali a
𝐾𝐲𝐸 about the
proposito della
Mass that
messa
Padre
che
Pio
Padre Pio
celebrated, Padre
celebrava,
Pio says,
Padre Pio
"I
dice,
feel
io
like I want to
sento di
intoxicate
volermi
myself with
inebriare di
pain."
dolore. Dico,
And
si
that is a
bada,
path, but
ma
that's how it is.
così
That's
è,
how it is,
figlioli
my dear
cari.
children.
Se
Otherwise,
no è
it's just chatter.
Se no è
Otherwise, it's a
un
Maurizio Costanzo
Maurizio
show. I
Costanzo
continue
show,
in the church,
continuo nella
which needs
Chiesa
saving,
che va salvata,
and it needs
che va
saving,
salvata,
as
e
we
va
will see
salvata,
now,
come ora vedremo,
in
nella
the right
direzione
direction.
giusta. Allora, Padre
So,
Pio,
Padre Pio, who
non
was
si è
not mistaken
sbagliato
about the
sulle
most
cose più
important things,
importanti
like the
come
one we're
quella che
about
ora
to
stiamo
discuss
per
now, was
trattare,
not
non si è
mistaken.
sbagliato. Nel
In 1960,
1960,
already an
è già una data
emblematic date,
emblematica perché, come
because as
sapete,
you
io
know, I
la
mention it in
propongo
my book
nel mio libro
Church,
Chiesa
Where
Dove
Are You
Vai come
Going, as the
ufficiale
official
data
date of Satan's final
dell'assalto
assault
finale
on the
di Satana
church.
alla Chiesa. Allora,
Well, among other
e
things,
tra
it was the
l'altro
year
era
when the
in cui
Madonna told
la
Sister
Madonna aveva detto a
Lucia
Sor
that
Lucia
the
che
third
venisse
secret of Fatima
rivelato
should
come
be
fosse il
revealed,
terzo segreto di
which was never
Fatima, che poi
disclosed
non è stato più
afterwards.
rivelato. Ecco.
Well, then
Allora, Padre
Padre Pio
molto
was very
sofferente
suffering
quel
that
giorno lì,
year, tells a young Don
dice a un
Gabriele Amorth.
giovane Don
Here we are
Gabriele
talking
Amorth,
about
quindi stiamo parlando di due uomini
two holy
santi,
men,
ciascuno col
each with
proprio
their own
stile e il
style and
proprio
charisma,
carisma, però stiamo
but we are
parlando di
talking
Padre
about Father
Gabriele
Gabriele
Amorth, che
Amorth,
non
who
certo
certainly
può
cannot be
essere sospettato
suspected
di
of
inventarsi
making these
queste
things
cose.
up. Father
Racconta
Amorth recounts that
Padre
Father
Amorth che
Pio,
Padre
well,
Pio, che
let me
Padre
keep it
Amorth, ve la
brief
faccio
because time
breve,
flies
perché poi il
quickly.
tempo
I
corre
still
via
haven't
velocemente,
mentioned the
ancora non ho
most
detto la cosa
important
più
thing.
importante. Però la
However,
premessa era
the
iniziata
premises were
soprattutto quella che
important,
la Chiesa si
especially the
salva
one
col
that the Church is
sacrificio, il
saved
dolore,
through
la
sacrifice,
preghiera,
pain, prayer, and
l'immolazione, non le
self-immolation,
tavole
not
rotonde
round
e
tables or
neppure i
debates of any
dibattiti
kind.
di qualunque tipo. E allora,
So, Don Gabriele
Don
Amort
Gabriele
says
Amorth
to
dice a
Padre
Padre
Pio, who he
Pio,
has
che lo
known for years
conoscevate
now.
ormai.
Don
Padre Pio
Gabriele
Amorth
Amort has
era
been
caro
visiting
Padre
Padre
Pio, già
Pio
da
since
più
he
anni
was very
vicino.
young. Father,
Padre, ma
but I
voi che
see
sta
you
fate
suffering
qui?
a
Vi
lot
vedo
in this
soffrire
phase,
molto,
more or
ti
less
vedo
with
con
these
queste
words.
parole. Padre Pio
Father Pio
conferma
confirms
guardandolo.
him.
E poi,
And then,
dopo un paio di
after a
istanti,
couple
come
of
Gesù
moments
con
like
Giovanni,
Jesus with
sente quasi il
John,
bisogno di
he almost feels the
confidargli
need to confide the
il
reason for
motivo
his
della sua
suffering.
sofferenza.
You
Sai,
know, Gabrielle, the
Gabriele,
fact that Father
il
Amorth
fatto che
wanted to
Padre
share with
Amorth
you what
abbia
Father
voluto
Pio said with the
riportare
statement,
quello che Padre Pio
so
diceva con l'affermazione
confidential,
sai
so
Gabriele,
conversational, shows how attentive
confidenziale,
he was to this.
colloquiale,
He
dimostra
was
quanto
careful to
sia
convey
stato
exactly
lui
what Father Pio
attento a
said.
riportare esattamente quello che Padre
Otherwise, he
Pio ha
would have
detto, altrimenti
immediately
basti
started with
subito
the
col dire la
phrase
frase.
instead of
Invece
saying woman
Don
death,
Abbott dice,
because it clearly stuck
evidentemente
with
gli è
him that
rimasta
Father
incisa,
Pio begins
e
by
Padre Pio
saying,
inizia col
you know,
dire sai,
Gabriele,
Gabriele, sai,
as a way to say, you know,
per dire Tizio come stai?
like,
Ma
how are
sai,
you?
no? È un modo
But you know, it's a way, it's
educato
an
per
opening to
dire ma
say,
se
if I
ipotizzi
could
il
tell you
futuro, ma che
everything,
te devo
but
dire?
what
Ha
do you
capito?
care?
Cioè,
You get it.
sai Gabriele,
I mean, you know,
ma quello che
Gabriele, the
sai.
gap that opens up,
E
and
la
the
frase è
phrase is shocking.
sconvolgente. Padre Pio, in quel
Father
caso,
Pio,
l'ultimo arrivato,
not just any
non
newcomer, not
subentrato,
in
non
a
è stato detto in un
newspaper,
dibattito
it wasn't mentioned in a
politico,
political, television, or
televisivo,
journalistic debate.
giornalistico. Padre Pio
Padre
che
Pio, who
domandava
bled
Fabio,
profusely.
sai
You know,
Gabriele,
Gabriella, it's
è
Satan.
Satana. Questo è l'attacco
The
anche
attack,
è
this too, is
Satana, come a
Satan.
dire
It's like saying
che
that
già
you,
tu,
Gabriele, and
Gabriele,
everyone
e
else need
tutti gli
to
altri
understand
dovete
what I'm
capire a che
referring
cosa
to.
mi riferisco, perché non è un
Because it's not an
attacco
attack.
normale, è
Normal. It's
Satana
Satan Satan who has infiltrated the Church. Up to this point, we agree with Father Tizio, journalist Caio, and all the others who believe that the canonical path is the only one to save the Church. To avoid misunderstandings, certain not entirely honest remarks sadden me greatly. I offer them in prayer. I have already told the person concerned many times, so they should have said that I mentioned this, that if the cardinals were to move, we would immediately take not one but 1,000 steps back. Brother Celestino would return to the hermitage and I would go back home, Don Enrico Bernasconi the same, Don Ramon identical, and so on. But heaven forbid that 3 cardinals, I tell you it won't happen, and if it does, it's merely a maneuver that will be revealed. Because if they haven't moved in 12 years, I'd like to understand, 12 years of destroying minds. Now we're going. So is it Satan who has infiltrated the church? If the church had only said that, anyone stubbornly insisting on following the canonical path by claiming that Bergoglio is not the Pope, but that the church is that, would be right. But to go against Padre Pio with all the holiness of the Carmelite father and the lay journalist takes some doing. I wouldn't feel right doing it, denying Padre Pio. They do the same as the traditionalists do now, because the traditionalists keep posting the photo of the fever where Padre Pio kisses their hand. And it's true because Lefebvre had great merits. But why do they forget to mention that Padre Pio loved Paul VI? Letters he wrote to him, and the love that Paul VI already had for Father Pio when he was a cardinal, and John Paul II, who for traditionalists is the Antichrist. What a great bond he had with Father Pio. He first went there when he was a theology student at 𝐥'𝐿 in Ramon, working on his doctoral thesis about John of the Cross. He heard about Father Pio and went to San Giovanni Rotondo, and Padre Pio met. Now we don't know exactly what they said to each other, but it's almost rather proven that Padre Pio revealed to him about the wound on his shoulder, because the young Karol Wojtyła asked Padre Pio what was the injury that caused him the most suffering. And then when he was a bishop at the Second Vatican Council, Wojtyła had Wanda Poltaska, who was suffering from cancer, a spiritual daughter dear to him. He was already Archbishop of Krakow and was participating in the Second Vatican Council. He wrote a letter to Father Pio asking if he could do something for Wanda. You know that Father Pio would sit there because he received an avalanche of letters, and the friars helped him choose those. So naturally, he wrote a bishop. It was also the period of Monsignor Maccari, and those things. So Padre Pio, to Ramon, was not seen. He was seen as a holy man, the poor dear soul, my goodness, a life in pain. So, yet Wojtyła trusted Padre Pio. He really did. So, he writes in this letter, the friars present it to him, and Padre Pio says, you can't say no to this. You can't say no to this. Then there's a testimony, but take it with a pinch of salt. I mention it because I trust it, but I don't force myself to trust it. It's from a spiritual daughter among the closest to Padre Pio. Her name escapes me now, but you'll find it in the book. She said that Padre Pio had announced he would be a pope stained with blood. I believe it because she was one of Padre Pio's closest spiritual daughters. She said it beforehand, and it's evident that it is. Anyway, back to what I was saying. I wouldn't want those last ones who have decided to break away, to follow the canonical path, to forget about Padre Pio, to the point of denying him. Because if Padre Pio had only said, you know, Gabriella, it is Satan who has infiltrated the church. All right then, Father Minutella, excuse me, I'm off. Because they are right. But Padre Pio then added that it is Satan who has infiltrated the church. So there is a first phase. No one sees as clearly as Domina Minutella. Trust him as long as he lives. Trust Don Minutella as long as he lives. Because God has established, I speak of him as if I were talking about another person. You can reach this. It may not be understood, but look, you can get to this point. Just like when St. Paul says, what you have seen, heard, in me is what you must do. All right, Don Minutella says, like he's talking about another, trust him. He's had the clearest vision from the start. It's Satan who has taken over the church. In fact, 1960 is the year, coincidentally, officially, as I write in my book 𝐥'𝐞𝐯, of Satan's entry into the Vatican. And so the inquiry fell, and so did Paul VI, the smoke of Satan, certainly. Look, we have proof of secret channels between Father Pio and Paul VI. Pope Paul VI wanted, I write it in my book, he wanted to go by helicopter to San Giovanni Rotondo in February '68, the year when Father Pio would die after the summer, to honor him for the sacrifice he made for the Church, because Pope Paul VI undoubtedly attributed a significant part of the solutions of the Second Vatican Council to Father Pio when it seemed that things were really not going well there. And Father Pio did everything he could. And then, well, it's Satan who finally intruded into the church. Let's say the decisive phrase, to go against Father Pio, there's one. But it's not by chance that I mention it at the end. And soon a false church will come to govern.
Verrà a governare una falsa chiesa. Allora,
You know, Gabrielle, it's Satan who has infiltrated the church. If this had been the only canonical way, it would have been the right one. That's enough. But Padre Pio added that Satan, who infiltrates through the Freemasons, will soon come to govern not the Catholic Church, not the Church of Jesus Christ, because this would jeopardize, as you can imagine. I say this as a theologian. I know a bit about it too. Of course, the media always has to portray me as a novice who understands nothing, who is making his way as a schismatic, as a leader of a cult. Say what you will, but if it were true that what Bergoglio leads is still the Catholic Church, after Pachamama, one would have to ask, where is the Lord? St. Peter's Basilica is desecrated. And then everything we know that we need to bring out the entire list of things done each time. How can it be considered still the Church of Christ? Do those on the canonical path realize? What poor souls. I care about them, I pray for them, and I will never cause a fuss. I'm speaking to warn you, though. But could there ever be a Catholic Church that goes against the gospel? But it's not enough to say there's an anti-pope. It's not enough to say that it's just a matter of canon law, because in the meantime, while we try to resolve it canonically, the carriers remain silent until proven otherwise. They are doing nothing, and above all, a new gospel has been established that goes against the gospel of Christ. But this is so completely evident. Then Father Pio is right. Satan will come to rule a false church. Soon, 1960 to 2013, it seems to me that things are more or less returning soon. Padre Pio was never wrong about prophecies. For example, I'll open a parenthesis. One thing that has troubled me quite a bit, I'll confide in you. In recent months, when the Lord granted me the grace to discover the truth, I sighed. Usually the Madonna would have said, she said at this point, without the conditional, to Conchita di Garabandal, that Padre Pio would have seen, he would have seen the great warning. So they thought, now it's not long because Padre Pio was already old. Padre Pio died in 1968, on the 23rd of September, '68, and we are still here waiting. Here's the great warning. So the apparition is not true. There's a detail I discovered that really gave me a great relief. A Franciscan friar close to Padre Pio went to meet Conchita. They met in Lourdes coincidentally, because Padre Pio, who I believe was already dead, let her know that he saw in a vision the great warning. So when the Madonna said Padre Pio would see the great warning, she meant in a vision, not in reality. With Padre Pio, it's difficult, but indeed traditionalists understand that they cannot touch him, they do not invoke him, they do not pray to Padre Pio. You know, Gabriella, it's Satan who has infiltrated the church, and soon he will come to rule a false church. It's not that he said it. Padre Pio couldn't have said it. He wouldn't have been Padre Pio anymore, and we would all have had to distance ourselves. It's not that he said it's Satan who has infiltrated the church and will come to govern it, because that would jeopardize the indefectibility of the church, the holiness of the church, the permanent presence of the church, because the church is holy, one holy, Catholic, and apostolic. Holy. But if it's Satan who governs, what kind of church is holy? Excuse me. But I mean, if it's Satan who governs, who writes a different gospel, the mission to gay couples, divorced and remarried people, all religions are the same. Look, they are dogmas. They are dogmas now. In Latin America, in the States, in much of Northern Europe, they are no longer blessings. That's what they wanted. They are marriages. With plenty of confetti and the abomination, because it goes openly against the gospel of Christ. How could it even be a Catholic church? If there is indefectibility, then I say something that perhaps I have never clarified, suffering, especially because I did not expect this mutiny. Benedict XVI did not hand over 𝐜𝐼𝑚s exactly for this reason. Let's try to reflect on what I mean. If it had only been a matter of resolving the issue in purely canonical legal terms, then if one were intelligent, they would have made different choices, not this drastic one. It is the choice of the Old Testament, which I will now read to you. We are in the second book of the Maccabees. It is written in the writings of the prophet Jeremiah. This is the word of God, as I commanded those who were taken into exile to take the sacred fire, which burned in the temple, which is said to have given warnings to these Syrians and delivered to them the law, so that they would not forget the commandments of the Lord, and would not be led astray by seeing the idols of gold and silver and their ornaments. And with other similar admonitions, he urged them not to cast the law from their hearts. And in the same writing, it was as if the prophet, by warning given to him by God, Jeremiah, ordered that the tabernacle and the ark accompany him until he reached the mountain where Moses ascended and saw the heritage of God, Mount Nebo. And when Jeremiah arrived, he found a cave there, and he placed inside it the tabernacle, the gold, and the altar of incense, and our returns. Do you understand what all this means for our times? Benedict XVI, enlightened by God, understood. He knew he understood. He definitely knew through private revelation, because popes have often been visited, like Leo XIII, Pius X, and others, St. Pius V, by particular visions in certain difficult historical circumstances. He knew that the false church was coming, which everyone would think was the Catholic Church. So what did he do? He did like Jeremiah. He took the gift and hid it. Munus is unavailable, beware. Unavailable, I'll explain. Most cardinals now are Bergoglio's picks, so they can't dispose of it. We can only hope, in this I wish and pray that it happens, that 3 cardinals appointed before Bergoglio. Before the conclave, I mentioned these things to the friends of the last struggle, so they can't say I didn't say them. If 3 cardinals come before the conclave, what do we do if they enter? I have to be told, it may be that Benedict XVI has written a document that they cannot, oh no, this is a spy story. The church is not exactly Sherlock Holmes. Benedict XVI did something else. He radically made the papal office unavailable to demonstrate exactly this. That is not the Catholic Church. Because a church without the office is not the Catholic Church. It is a sectarian church. It is the church of Bergoglio. It is the church of the Freemasons. It is the church of Satan. But it is not the Catholic Church because the papal office is lacking. Benedict XVI, I like this image. My dear, Benedict XVI, despite his governments, acted like Jeremiah. In the face of the Babylonian assault, he took what mattered in time and made it unavailable to the enemies. He put it there, inside a cave, that no one, says the 𝐷 knew where it was anymore. Then God, be careful, the church belongs to Jesus Christ. The church is not ours. It is not a human consortium. It is not a farm available to the last person who arrives thinking they have a clear idea. God's Jesus Christ. So this mule, I put it, if it was done like Jeremiah, he took it to prepare it for the final assault of the enemies. He took it and he hid it. And he hid it, leaving it to God. It's not that, for example, I would like to know who it is, for instance, radio 𝐥'𝐿, who from those parts, who has now split from us, was praised, lauded, because he would have revealed. Who's revealing? Benedict XVI. Finally, I can say it with a certain freedom. I believe he never trusted 𝐷𝐸ZWINE. He told M. Fellet, my authority only extends to that threshold. In fact, 𝐷𝐸ZWINE speaks. In fact, 𝐷𝐸ZWINE is silent. In fact, 𝐷𝐸ZWINE has been sent to the Baltic countries, and that's that. No, Beto Secchi hasn't spoken to anyone about the deeper reason for the choice, who that was, that the enemies are coming, what needs to be saved immediately. The treasure, my treasure, what is it? What is the treasure that needed saving to make everyone understand? This is what Benedict XVI did. It is a light more than ever today. Benedict XVI did this to show everyone. They will make you believe it is still the Catholic Church. But I have hidden the munus. I have the munus. And why haven't I given it to them? Why this choice? Because you understood that they are the founders of the false church of darkness. Now, somewhere they find time to challenge me that these reflections on the false church are prophetic and mystical. Melchior Cano, as the theologians who contradict me lately will know, spoke of theological loci. There is a pyramidal structure, so it is clear that the Word of God comes first. Well, in the Holy Scriptures, between the letter of Paul to the Thessalonians, and also some statements of Jesus in the Synoptic Gospels, especially in the Revelation itself, this evidence is mentioned. Let's not delve in, though, I've talked for years. But above all, look, the prophetic dimension and the mystical dimension are not at all. Those who say this are mistaken. They make a serious, unjustifiable hermeneutical error, because the dimension, let's call it that, the mystical, prophetic dimension, is by no means inferior to what has been understood. Because the Church is not a human consortium, and indeed we have seen how, over the centuries, exceptional charisms and unexpected situations have developed that the Holy Spirit has brought forth, and I would almost say in defiance of the very code of canon law, and the Church had to intervene to rectify when Innocent III himself confronted with that foul little brother from Assisi, who I won't say smelled, but certainly for heaven's sake, you're going to see the Pope at least wash your feet. And I imagine they were all dirty because he slept in a sort of pigsty. Then he just sat there. At least that's how I've read it. So he goes to see the Pope because he needs to explain that he wants to live the gospel. The Pope treats him very poorly, Innocent III, but really badly, because he evidently did not meet the legal and canonical requirements. But the Church belongs to Jesus Christ, and it is the gospel that commands, not in the code, because it is not a parliament, it is not a state. The Church is not the Vatican City. The following night, or after I don't know how long, Innocent III dreams of that friar who carries the Catholic Church on his shoulders, St. John Lateran. It's very beautiful, this in Zeffirelli's film. Look, it's wonderful. Where? Do you remember that the Pope raising his hand is played by Anthony Quinn, right? Cathedral of Monreale. Where is it? Where is that, brother? Adds, that's a giant. The Pope. Why? How did he get there with canon law? Sonotones, good night. How did Innocent III come to say that Francis of Assisi was a giant? With the light of the Holy Spirit. So this phrase from Padre Pio, I believe, explains everything. You know, Gabriella, it's Satan who has infiltrated the church, and soon he will govern a false church. If it's false, it isn't true. So what does that mean? Has the church vanished? How often do we say it? The Catholic Church has disappeared. Now Sister Alessia says no, the Catholic Church hasn't disappeared. And where is the Catholic Church? She does this because she can't speak. What does this mean? The good Sicilian, we communicate like the Arabs, a lot with gestures. She does this. What is it? But it's good, I like it, because it makes a circle, and the circle signifies communion, brotherhood, in the small remainder. Now, I would like to say something to avoid misunderstandings. I am in an immense state of calm. Why is that? The work isn't ours. If God has determined that the Catholic Church survives in a small remnant, while in Rome, the false church of the darkness of Satan has taken root for as long as God wills, it's not that defections, abandonments, or opposing stances frighten us. We know we are telling the truth. The ultimate conclusions are very dangerous, because to say that Bergoglio is not the Pope, but that is still the Catholic Church, means playing a devilish card no less serious than those who say that he is the Pope. And this is the Catholic Church. What changes? What is changing? If this place where they are is not the Catholic Church, it is the Church of Pachamama. And it's the church that blesses gay couples, and the church of the anti-vaccine. And then, excuse me, I would say to our last-minute friends, excuse me, I would like to raise a question to which there has evidently been no willingness to respond. And just this, as I said last night, if I weren't Don Dominatella, I would have followed him only because he asked for a debate, as always happens. And nothing, but excuse me, you write, you do the documents, you want to save the lion, you don't hand it over. Then Don Minutella asks you for a debate precisely because he wants to show that you're wrong about the things you've said in front of everyone, and you refuse. Refuse. Why do you refuse? They find them. They always find 1,000 excuses to avoid confrontation. But I would have asked, do you realize that if I am the Antichrist, there needs to be the anti-church? It requires what Fulton Sheen called the mystical body of the Antichrist. It's not that the Antichrist is coming, because if he takes the Church of Rome, still Christ's church, that's blasphemy. And Father Faré, in my opinion, has inadvertently blasphemed. When he says that the church Bergoglio leads is still the Catholic Church, he is cursing without realizing it. Because if it were true, the indefectibility and holiness of the church would be undermined. Because the church that belongs to Jesus Christ cannot parade the Antimaria. Or am I mistaken, inside St. Peter's Basilica? It can't. It's not that we assume, I don't know if both of these last ones have been blinded. I don't know. It's not that we assume it's an antipope, but the doctrinal dogmatic status quo essentially remains the same. Because, since I know a bit about it too, I would like to say that when examining the cardinals who became false popes, antipopes, essentially, apart from a few rare exceptions but nothing shocking, valid popes have caused problems. But the antipopes, perhaps precisely because they knew they weren't, loved the status quo, enjoyed it, you see? He focused quite a bit on political aspects, on diplomatic aspects, the relationship with states, but the dogmatic, doctrinal, and moral aspect was not addressed. Instead, with Bergoglio, there is an antichristic subversion. There is a gospel that contradicts that one. Matthew says in 9:9, anyone who divorces their wife and marries another commits adultery. Amort Laetitia, communion for the divorced and the remarried. How can you say this is still the Catholic Church? It's a shame that there are people who have been caught up in this, and in the end, they ask me, even until yesterday, at In Bologna, I would like to say this. I'll conclude, and then I'll leave you space for calls. I want to tell you this. Until yesterday in Bologna, I was referred to as father, but we can't seem to find an agreement to avoid confrontation. Excuse me. In the meantime, I haven't created any of this. It's just landed on my feet, because if the Father had come to meet me earlier, none of this would have happened. We would have found a way to say you for yours and I for mine. Let's not create a fuss among the people. Patience. And then I asked for a public discussion after it erupted, not by my choice, this whole issue, and the public discussion is denied by the priest. So at that point, what should I do? Should I, to avoid conflict and division, accept that this is still the Church of Jesus Christ? Sorry, it's an undeniable point for me to say that what Bergoglio leads is not the Catholic Church. And this is a crucial point. The devil has launched an unprecedented attack, in my opinion, but it's not going very well for him. It's also one of their biggest merits. Don Ramon? Brother Celestino first, because even if there were initial reports, the response from this side was straightforward. The first was the homily of Brother Celestino, for which apologies were demanded. But he said what he thought. Why should he apologize? One who in the sermon speaks their mind apologizes. Brother Celestino has never disrespected anyone. In fact, he would even justify the devil if he could. Then Don Ramon provided us with what he said on Saturday evening, but above all, Don Enrico, who anticipated these moves. Don Enrico San Pio Tanks anticipated these moves and put them in writing. In front of a distracted person, not minutla, distracted attention. In what terms? Relational. For me, they are all good. Seems so, though it's not. For me, they're all good. I don't say it. In fact, I shout, and then I'm worse than Brother Celestino. I'm buying time. Let's wait and see. And then, just when you take your time, they come at you in a way you can't imagine. Stand firm, dear children. That's not Christ's church with a false pope. That is the church of Satan, as Father Pio said to Donna Mort. Gabriella? It's Satan who has infiltrated the church and will soon govern a false church.